A quick note from the On the Table with Ashley team. We're releasing Ashley's conversation with Kane Hodder in 2 parts, with part 2 coming out on August 14th. This is the first time we're releasing a 2-part episode, and we're doing that in an effort to offer our guests a break so that they're not recording for multiple hours straight, and to make the episodes more digestible for you all. You may notice over the next few episodes that we're reformatting the structure of our episodes slightly, but with the commitment to preserving curiosity and the joy of learning through open conversation and human connection. If you have ideas or feedback on our episodes, feel free to email us at reachoutanytime@almaton.com or DM us on Instagram at almatond. You'll find both those links in the show notes. Enjoy part 1 of today's conversation with Kane Hodder.
Welcome to On the Table with Ashley, a podcast where I explore ways in which we can lead more fulfilling lives and amplify human connection by increasing our curiosity and communicating with less judgment and more respect. It's my pleasure to welcome Kane Hodder to On the Table with Ashley today. Kane is best known for playing Jason Voorhees in 4 of the Friday the 13th movies, to this day being the only actor to play Jason in multiple films. He has acted in over 180 films, including playing lead Victor Crowley in the Hatchet series and Dennis L. Rader in the real-life serial killer known as BTK in the fictionalized biographical crime film also titled BTK. Aside from being the only actor to reprise the role of Jason Voorhees, he has also been the only actor to play 3 of the most infamous horror icons in the history of horror films. In addition to playing Jason Voorhees, he also played Freddy Krueger's gloved hand at the end of Jason Goes to Hell in 1993 and did the stunts for Leatherface in Leatherface Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 in 1990. Kane started his career as a stuntman, an area of expertise he has continued throughout his career, including acting, producing, and managing safety of all stunts on movies as well. Kane is also the subject of the 2017 documentary To Hell and Back, The Kane Hodder Story, and co-wrote the 2011 book Unmasked, the True Life Story of the World's Most Prolific Cinematic Killer, and its updated version, Kill, released in 2021. Kane co-wrote these books with Michael Aloisi and includes the autobiographical details of Kane's life, career, and personal challenges, including his journey in the horror film industry and the burn accident that nearly took his life. He and Michael Aloisi also co-wrote the 2017 book, Killer Trivia, a collection of horror movie trivia. You can buy all of these books at darkinkbooks.com, and we'll put that in the show notes as well. Kane attends horror conventions regularly, traveling widely to greet his fans, and continues to actively pursue his career in acting. You can find Kane on X at Kane Hodder 1, on TikTok at Kane Hodder _author Mike, and on Instagram at Kane Hodder 13. Kane also has a podcast called Casualty Friday that everybody should check out, and we'll put all of those links in the show notes. Welcome. Thank you for joining me.
Happy to be here, Ashley.
All right. So you discuss this in detail in your book, Unmasked, and then the updated version, Kill, all about your childhood and upbringing. But I always like to start with a bit of your childhood, what kind of kid you were, so that we can share that with listeners. And you had, I think, a particularly interesting childhood, geographically speaking. So I'd love you to touch on that.
Yeah, when I was in elementary school, we lived in Reno, or Sparks, if anyone knows that area outside of Reno. And, I don't talk about it all the time, but my dad had a job with the Corps of Engineers that would take him away from us for a year at a time. And twice between the age of 4 and 12, he was gone for an entire year in South Korea working. And at that time, he wasn't able to come home at any time. And in between. So that kind of was tough as a kid. And the fact that I had no brothers and sisters of the same parents. I had two half sisters that that were my mom's daughters, but they were much older than me by the time their dad died, and my mom met my dad.
Mm-hmm.
They had one kid, which was me, by the time I was 6.
Yeah.
And ironically, I have my oldest nephew is 6 years younger than me. So I was because of those things, and I was kind of meek. That's the term I use. That's when I kind of got bullied quite a bit in 6th grade, 7th grade.
And you talk about that a lot in the book. I think it was after that period that you moved to the small island. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And what is the name of that island?
Fraudulent.
Okay. And you lived there for how many years?
I was there for a little over 5 years, all of 8th grade and all of high school. And then my dad got another job after I graduated in American Samoa. So we moved there. I was going to go to college, and I took a semester off to be able to go with them and experience American Samoa, because that was just crazy. My dad was there to build a boat harbor on that island, because when we arrived, we had to unload from the tugboat to a longboat, which is a giant canoe, with all of our stuff, including a refrigerator. And we lived in the old missionaries dispensary. Most of the time I was there. They built a house for my mom and my dad, but then I eventually, after a few months, went back to Reno and started school at UNR.
Yeah. So I thought it was first of all, you have some photographs in the book that I think are really cool, because it gives you really a sense of how remote it was. And I'm sure it's changed a lot since then. But how was it moving from Reno, where you had everything at your fingertips, to these really isolated islands with very small populations? I mean, I know it was instrumental in like who you became, but what do you remember? Like, do you remember being excited about that or hating it?
Was not having a good life in Reno with the bullying and all that stuff going on. So I was happy to get a change. And then we go to an island where not only is it a small population, but it technically is a military base, the whole island. So consequently, there's no crime at all.
Wow.
If you're caught committing any kind of crime, you're literally kicked off the island for good. If you do any kind of crime, you don't pay for housing, you don't pay for utilities. All you pay for is your food. Yeah. And no income tax. So people loved going there for 3 years, saving up a bunch of money, and then being able to come back to the States and get a nice house.
I mean, it also, and maybe I'm just thinking about today's world with all of the noise and social media and everything. I mean, it sounds idyllic in a lot of ways. Like you have a picture, you're on your bicycle with your parents, and it just seems like a pretty wholesome life. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. It was the best place I've ever lived, for sure.
Really?
American Samoa was a little remote, even though I was used to not having everything at the fingertips, because, we had a Macy's on the island, on Kwajalein.
Did you really?
Yeah, but half the time stuff was out of stock. Wait a month.
Yeah.
But it was a little Macy's store and a little grocery store, and almost nobody drove vehicles. Yeah. Everybody rode bikes. Yeah. Because the island was 3 miles long.
Right. It was tiny.
The whole thing.
Yeah.
A mile wide. So it was easy to get around on a bike. It was hot as hell.
Yeah. So you've had a number of things in your life that I think, and we'll get obviously to your burn and other things that have like really defined you. In that period when you were living on these remote islands, like have you reflected on what that's kind of contributed to your personality or your drive for success or anything?
I don't know. I feel like I would have had the same drive for success in the career I wanted, no matter where I was living, but it was maybe a little easier being in high school out there because I could concentrate on other things. And because so many of my classes in high school were, 10 students.
Yeah.
Or like French class.
Yeah.
Which I know you're very interested in the French language. I had five of us in that class, and I was the only guy.
Yeah.
And when you don't have everything at your fingertips, then I think you appreciate when things come more.
Yeah.
And we would always be able to make a trip back every year from the island back to Reno or somewhere to get some time off the island, even though, by the time you went back to the island, you were happy to be back.
Right. Yeah. Time flies.
Man. And then I went to UNR for 3 semesters. After the 3rd semester, went to visit my friend in LA, hang out with him, and we went to Universal Studios, and that was the turning point.
Yeah.
When I saw that live stunt show, I said, I knew immediately, I said, that's what I want to do. I have no idea how to get into it, but that's the kind of career I want. And I used to do all this stuff to entertain my friends just by doing crazy things.
Yeah, I was going to say that in the book you talk about, the one that sticks out to me is you guys had gone, I don't know where you had gone, some other island maybe, and you were in Hawaii, and you were up high, and
Very high.
How high were you?
I'm holding on to the railing, looking down 350 feet, and then saying, hey, what's the matter? And they took off. They couldn't stand it anymore, and I'm out there on the outside of the railing by myself because they just said, nope, I'm not going to watch this guy fall. I found it so funny because I've never had any kind of fear of heights. And
I wonder, have you ever had your brain like scanned for that? So there's this movie about this guy who climbs. It's called Free Solo. I don't know if you've seen it. And they talk about his brain and how it's part of his amygdala is like not there. So he just doesn't have fear. And you might have the same thing. Like you just maybe don't feel it.
It's not that I don't feel it. I feel it, but it's a good feeling.
Okay, interesting.
Like when I'm up high and right on the edge of something.
Yeah.
I it's not like I don't even feel anything. I feel it, but it's like I'm doing something that most people wouldn't do.
Right.
Which is you have fear of heights. And, I got burned, as we're going to talk about, I'm sure, and almost died, and 5.5 months in the hospital and everything, and never developed a fear of fire.
I know. And you did stunts afterwards with fire, which we'll talk about. So that's interesting. With your other friends who are stunt people, do they have that same like euphoria with respect to fear? Have you talked about that?
We have. There are people that are very similar with that kind of feeling. And, I don't know if you've ever seen me on my bike around the neighborhood and stuff.
A little bit, yeah.
40 miles an hour going down those hills on my bicycle and no helmet. And I prefer to never, which is not smart, I know, but I prefer to never wear a seatbelt, which Susan hates. Of course.
Right, of course.
But
I'm with Susan on this.
Sometimes I think I came to the realization that part of that, not just a defiance of safety, but part of it is like I'm 69 now, so I don't do the dangerous stunts that I used to do.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a part of my life that's missing all the thrills.
Mm.
So if I do something slightly dangerous, like not wearing a helmet, not wearing a seatbelt, it's minor, but you're taking more of a risk than you should.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm still hanging in there.
That makes sense to me.
I also do have the defiant thing where if everybody else is doing it, I'm not going to. That makes me an asshole. But
And I think that started from the story in the book. It seems like that actually has almost always been part of your personality. Maybe not when you were very young, but even on the island, you have stories where you were pretty defiant. So it seems like it was relatively young. And your dad had some of that too. You have this quote, which I thought was pretty amazing in the book. You wrote, so your father was really a wonderful man. You're right. He was so good. He did something I can't imagine ever doing. My mother had been married before she met him. Her first husband had died. When she married my father and I was born, my father suggested to my mother that my middle name be Warren after her first husband. That's how good a man he was. I mean, that's pretty amazing. And it seems to me, and you know, I'm just getting to know you. I don't know you all that well, that you have both sides of your dad in you. So you have this defiant side, and I'm going to be a stuntman, and I'm going to defy all the odds, even after my burn, and, you know, just never back down. And also this very like focused on your family side, which is very lovely. You have 2 children and you have a wonderful wife, and that is so important to you. So I feel like you also have these like 2 sides that your dad had.
yeah,
And,
I would agree.
but you don't talk as much about your mom. I mean, you talk about how much you loved her, and she passed away, and you dedicate your book to her. And you also, and again, we'll get into the burn, but after your burn, you had this, I don't even know what to call it. And you've probably explored this like with therapists, but you had some kind of like transference. So even though your family was not with you when you were burned, there was something in your brain that connected the burn to them. So you had a hard time with them after, including your mom. But can you tell us a little bit about your mom and like, what did you get from her? It's obvious to me what you got from your dad, just from what you've shared in the book.
Yeah. My mom, you know, did not have an easy life after my dad died. He died right before I turned 25.
Mm-hmm.
That's way too young.
Way too young.
And, you know, I mean, getting kind of backtracking a little bit, my dad's biggest dream was for me to get a college degree because he didn't even go to high school and did pretty well for himself. And he had another daughter, so I have another half sister that I never met.
Still haven't met?
And but his big dream was for his son to get a college degree. So he was so happy when I started college, and then when I decided to quit and try and pursue the stunt career, he wasn't real happy about it, which I knew, but he didn't really express it. He still gave me enough flexibility to hope it worked. Mm-hmm. But I think in the back of his head, he was like, he'll find out it's impossible, and then he'll go back to school.
Right.
That's how he never said that, but I always felt that he may have had that state of mind. Mm-hmm. So I start my career, I get into SAG, which is...
Yeah, tell people what SAG is.
Screen Actors Guild.
And it's very hard to get into.
Very hard. You can't just join. It's like a political process thing you have to go through. And every working stunt person and actor is a member of Screen Actors Guild. So I was able to get into SAG, and I don't even think, I'm not sure if I talked about it, how, but my mom had a friend that she knew most of her life, a female friend from school and stuff, and they kept in touch. And we were trying to figure out, how do I get into SAG? And she goes to me one day, my friend so-and-so, her son is the mayor of Burbank. And I thought, he's not a studio guy, but there's the major Warner Brothers is in Burbank. So I got into SAG, and then I said, I'm official now. Now, this is when the hard part comes, getting work.
Right.
Because you don't audition for stuff.
Yeah, explain that to people. So you talk about that in the book. For actors, they audition. I mean, not that it's easy, of course. It's very difficult, but it's even more difficult for stunt people because you don't get to audition. You have to know somebody.
Right. And, like you said, it can be a long shot, but it's a shot if you are trying to get into acting. And if you do a good audition, like Henry Thomas, the little boy from E.T.,
mm-hmm.
I do a lot of conventions with him and stuff, and he talks about his audition, and he just nailed it. With stunts, you have to be hired by a stunt coordinator, and no stunt coordinator is going to hire you unless you have experience, which you can't get if nobody hires you,
Right.
or if you're a legacy. That helps tremendously.
Okay, I'm sure.
Just like with getting into some colleges.
Right.
Your parents,
and acting, too.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But if you're the close relative of a successful stunt person, people will look at you sooner.
Okay.
But point of bringing up my dad was that I never got my degree. He was around when I got burned,
mm-hmm.
which was my first year as a professional stuntman. So he had to endure the whole 5.5 months in the hospital, and he could barely walk in my room because the smell and stuff was reminders for him of the war and everything. So he survived that and still thought maybe this will show him he should go back to school. I don't know if that's true, but I feel that might have been possible. And I didn't. I kept going and wanted to do it more now than ever. And I just knew he was like, God, really? You're still going to try this? And then, as fate would have it, he died before I could show him I made the right choice. My dad really wasn't too sympathetic with other people's difficulties. Not that he would be shitty about it, but I could just tell he didn't want to deal with it. And fortunately from my mom, I got more of a feeling of, somebody's going through something that you don't understand.
Right.
Doesn't mean it's not difficult for them.
Right.
You may think, come on, man, just get over it. Oh, I've heard that a million times with the OCD stuff that I have and the which you experienced when I got out of the car. But I think it was inherently in my personality from my mom to be a little more understanding and sympathetic with other people's stuff.
Yeah.
But then when you go through something as traumatic as a terrible burn injury, that increases even more.
Yeah. So I think, and I think you'll agree with this from the book, the bullying that you experienced, the burn that you experienced, losing your father, all of these things, horribly traumatic and difficult. And I do think have given you this like deep compassion that your fans seem to really connect with. So you have a lot of quotes near the end of the book of people's stories meeting you and what it meant to them. And they're not superficial, right? These are people who are sharing with you suicidal thoughts, sharing with you like serious like body image issues, health issues, all kinds of issues. And they sort of just like open up to you. And then they're willing to like publicly share that story, which is also pretty amazing. And I think you say in the book, like one of the things you're most proud of in your career is that you've been able to really help people and really even like save lives, which is with the book maybe in particular, or maybe also at conventions.
Both, but mainly the book and the documentary.
Because of the reach.
Yeah, because you really see people's reaction and stuff. But conventions all the time are it's the best part of it. I mean, you make a shitload of money and you have a lot of fun because you're with your friends.
Yeah.
And hanging out and playing jokes on each other. And we all know each other very well.
Right.
Anybody that has done anything in horror does these conventions.
Yeah.
And we all just have a great time. But when you can connect with somebody that's not used to that happening, best part of the whole thing.
Yeah.
There are cases where other actors avoided. These are typically fans that they avoided because they were uncomfortable talking to them. A lot of times we see a lot of people in wheelchairs, a lot of times with, I believe it's spastic CP.
Okay.
Cerebral palsy. It's a spastic type where
their body moves involuntarily.
And they can barely talk and stuff. And, I see people avoid them too. And I'm like, God damn, man, this person is a fan, might have difficulty communicating, but try.
Yeah.
Walk over and fucking talk to them.
Well, you know what it feels like. You write about in the book after the burn how it felt to go back in public and feel like everybody's watching you. So I think that you know what that feels like. So you want to help those people more, probably.
Maybe, yeah. I mean, with the burn, it's a horrible thing to survive. And as you're alluding to, once you survive, then the work starts.
Right.
Which I know
is lifelong work.
Because when your burned skin heals, it tightens up.
Yeah.
And makes, that's why I say you survive and get off the pain, then the work starts.
Yeah.
And my mom would stretch me every day and, just do the exercises to try and minimize this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's just the contractures.
So let me talk a little bit about the burn. So, okay. So it was July 1977.
It was July 13th, 77.
Okay. You were in Nevada, and you were doing an interview and a photo shoot with a local reporter. And you were actually supposed to do the stunt on the 12th.
We did do the stunt.
Okay.
And I just wanted to let her be able to take pictures of the Hollywood stuntman doing a fire stunt.
Okay.
And
so you said you'd do it again.
I didn't like how the pictures looked.
Okay.
It was too windy.
Okay. And on the 12th, you were actually near a body of water. On the 13th, for some reason, you guys went out into the desert. There was no water around. There's nothing.
No wind.
There's okay. No wind, no water, nothing. And you had been using this like certain brand of rubber cement, and you ran out, or I don't know, or didn't pack it with you. And the reporter had some with her. And so you just used hers, assuming it would act in the same way. And it obviously did not. So basically, okay, you were 22 years old. And maybe you can describe it better, like with the rubber cement and everything and how the stunt worked.
Right. Well, typically if you do a fire stunt on a film, you have very good protective gear under your wardrobe.
Okay.
still, you might use rubber cement for the fuel. It always burns so bright. It looks fantastic on film. But the more important thing is that you have safety guys.
Yeah.
Just off camera with extinguishers. And their whole cue, I shouldn't say guys, it's not always guys, but safety people.
Yeah.
Their cue to put you out with the extinguishers that are ready to go is when you hit the ground.
Okay.
If you're standing on fire, it's up to you to know when to be put out. Then you go face down, they put you out, and you're good. And I didn't have any safety people with me because of ignorance, really. I should have tested the new glue, which I did not. And I should have had somebody there for safety, which is by far the biggest mistake I made.
Yeah.
And I think later on, when I would talk about in interviews, before the book was written, talk about the different brand of glue, I started thinking, oh man, I hope that she doesn't think I'm blaming her.
Right.
Because she brought the glue and I got burned. Because she would not talk about it for years.
So the glue that you had, when you rolled in the dirt, it would go out. The fire would go out.
Yep.
And then the glue that you used that day, it just would not go out. So I can't remember if you say this in the book, how long do you think you were actually burning?
I would always light myself.
Okay.
And I would always have, protection on certain areas that were supposed to burn. That's why this arm is all scars. This one is none. Because I had the protection from here to here.
I can see that right now.
My arm could burn and I could go,
Yeah.
So.
And you had full facial hair, which was a blessing, right? Didn't you? You had a beard and long hair.
I believe the reason my face isn't burned is because for some reason I had the foresight to say, oh, I'm burning. I did that.
Okay.
Along with my beard, which helped, but I also covered my face with my hands.
Yeah. So how long do you think you were burning? Do you know?
If I really had to think, 30, 40 seconds.
Okay. So you sustained life-threatening burns. And then you say, and this is like a lot to take in, but you say your flesh was like literally falling off of you. And you were in shock. I don't think you felt it right away. I think that's normal, right? I don't know.
Yes.
It's like
almost so intense that you don't feel anything.
And it was, honestly, I think it's a miracle. I said this to you before. It sounds to me like a miracle that you survived because everything went wrong, like literally everything. So first of all, you were out in a remote area. There was no water around. Then the photographer, you told her, like, I need to get to the hospital. She drives to like a fire station. Nobody's there. You go across the street to this woman's house who you do later talk to, and she's in the book.
Yes, the woman allowed me into her house to stand in her shower, which I think was, I don't even know whose idea that was, whether I thought it was good, or she said it, or the reporter, whatever. But it was the best thing to get just cool water running on, because I guess maybe it helps control the damage that would be further done.
Okay. Yeah.
And, I remember the little girl, I'm sure you're going to mention, the little girl was playing and I walked through the house and she was terrified.
But you said later she didn't have a memory of it, or it wasn't traumatizing for her.
Evidently.
Yeah.
She was young enough to not really remember it. So I was kind of happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Her mom was kind of traumatized because,
Yeah, but she did such an amazing thing. So she
still barely had any clothes left.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Because everything was burned off.
Yeah. And then somebody calls the ambulance, probably the photographer or the journalist.
Right.
Cell phones back. Yeah. So an ambulance comes and then it breaks down on the way to the hospital. I mean, I'm reading this and I'm like, this cannot actually be true.
I know.
And then you finally get to a hospital and there's no burn unit. And months later, I mean, it's probably years later, you realize like they had no idea what they were doing. And
I kind of thought that at the time, but I also wasn't sure what proper burn care should be.
right. How would you know?
I felt like, man, it can't be this much pain.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't giving me pain medication properly, and he thought I'd become addicted, and you can't worry about that shit when you have such a injury.
The fact that so you had multiple skin graft surgeries. You can explain what some of these are. Debridement, which is scraping dead skin off of you daily for some period of time, and again without really any pain management. And then having your arms locked in place, which you told us about, with pins to try to get them to take the skin grafts and heal underneath. A staph infection, which was probably because you didn't have any sterilization because they didn't know what they were doing. And all of that is before you were actually transferred to a burn unit. And you said that was 5.5 months of that?
4 months in the other hospital.
4 months.
Then I went to the burn unit.
And you were not getting better. And you say in the book, like the doctor basically told your parents, like, you might die and they don't know what to do. So they're going to send you to this burn unit. And everybody's like, burn unit? Like, why hasn't he been in a burn unit this entire time? So
it'd be one thing to be in the hospital for a couple of weeks and then shipped.
Right. Until you were like stable.
4 months.
I mean,
and I was in such terrible shape when I got to the burn unit.
And then you quickly did make a lot of progress physically once you got to the burn unit because you were getting appropriate care, sterile environment. But then, and I don't know, it was probably before then the mental like anguish started, but you definitely talk about in the burn unit, like almost like giving up, which is maybe the only time in your life you felt like that. And then you tell the story of a guy who clearly had been burned, talking and joking with the nurses, and you saw him. I think it was all glass in there, maybe?
Yeah, I'm laying in my bed. And in this particular burn unit in San Francisco, the nurses' station was in the middle of the unit. And from the station, they could look in all directions and see through windows to each patient without having to get up and go in the room, which is great because you can make sure everything's okay just by looking around.
Right.
And I was very depressed and thinking, I don't know if this is worth it. This is after, 5 months in the hospital and wondering if I even wanted to continue.
Right.
Because, when I said there's the pain, then the work starts with the recovery, then you also get to live with the constant reminder of it. Every time you look in the mirror, oh yeah.
Or just look down or,
With other medical situations, if you survive, you don't necessarily have that visual reminder. So I'm in my bed, not in a good state of mind at all. And I'm looking at the nurse's station. I see a guy come in that's all gowned up and he was, talking to the nurses and laughing and having a good old time. And I was like, oh, I fucking hate you because you're happy.
Yeah.
I'm in here suffering.
But could you tell he was burned?
Not at that time.
Okay.
That's why I hated it.
Okay.
Then, as I'm watching him, because I have nothing else to do, I can't even watch TV because I can't use my hands.
Right.
If anything, I could change the remote with my foot. Then I saw him pull up his sleeve of his gown, and I'm looking, I said, wait a second, he's got burn scars. And that's when it occurred to me, which we all do, which I did also, in this very unit, once you finally get out and get home, eventually you want to come back and show off how good you're doing, how well you're doing. And it just helps your state of mind. When, I left the unit at 140 pounds or something. And when I finally got to come back in there and visit them, I was doing way better. So that's what he was doing, just to show that, his progress. And that's when totally I turned around saying, if this guy can do it, I think I can.
Yeah.
He's happy.
Yeah.
He's got as much scars, if not more than me. But he's happy. He's laughing. I haven't laughed in fucking months.
Yeah.
And he totally turned me around, never met him.
Yeah.
Isn't
that beautiful? I think it's beautiful. There's something very poetic about it.
I could have said, hey, man, thanks.
But you've done it for other people too.
Right.
Right?
But, it just would have been nice for him to know that he helped me.
Yeah.
Without even meeting me.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So that was an important moment. And then when you got out of the burn, you had to wear a suit called a Jobst bodysuit. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Jobst, yes.
Okay. And that's a compression suit made of nylon or spandex, or sometimes it can have cotton, and it reduces scarring. And you had to wear it 24 hours a day for how long?
A year and a half.
And did it go how did it go all the way to here?
And gloves.
And gloves.
Gloves, sleeves, neck, all the way up to here.
Like a mock turtleneck kind of?
Yeah, exactly. My whole body and my legs, because I had some burns on my legs, but also the donor sites. When you have skin graft procedure, in order to heal badly burned tissue, you have to have skin from your own body.
Okay.
It can't be, they do sometimes cadaver skin or pig skin back then temporarily.
Yeah.
But you'll never heal unless it's skin from your own body.
So they would take skin from your ankle and they would put it on your arm or something.
Right. And they lay it, basically. It's so thin, you can almost see through the skin.
Yeah.
But it's your own skin, and it's covering a decent amount of burned tissue, so it'll heal.
Yeah.
It's a
okay.
process, and you can't move.
Really?
For that, I had to be splinted just everywhere so that the skin wouldn't be disturbed.
So you were in this Job suit for about a year, and you said it was extremely uncomfortable, but you also realized it helped you getting used to being in public again. So kind of going back to what you're saying with the guy with the tongue and people with cerebral palsy, it's like everybody was looking at you because you looked different. So having the suit in a way was a blessing, because even though it was very uncomfortable, it helped you they would look at the suit and they weren't looking at your scars.
Staring at me, only because I'm wearing something different.
Yeah. And then you write about going back to the site of the burn a year after, when you were still very, very weak and in the Job suit, but you forced yourself to go. And it was actually, you said, even hard to drive. And then you wrote, the smell of my skin melting, the sound of my beard and hair shriveling up and singeing my flesh, the heat in my lungs, it was all coming back too fast and too hard for me to even open my eyes. In the year after the accident, I had cried countless times, mostly out of anger or pain, but this time the tears were different. I could now look forward to the future and take my life back. I wasn't going to let the burns or anything else stop me from living the life I wanted to live. And I feel like you really haven't. And maybe it started in the burn unit where you saw that guy and it sort of was solidified that day you went back to the burn site. But I think there's something extremely powerful in making up your mind. And it feels like you just made up your mind in that moment. I'm not going to let this ruin my life. Is that true?
Yes, I would say that's completely accurate, where, I was still 22.
You were young.
Which is the only reason I survived, I feel, with such shitty care and horrible medical staff and no insurance.
Yeah.
No insurance at all, because I was just old enough to have been taken off my parents' insurance, but hadn't worked enough in SAG to qualify for insurance.
Yeah.
So I always thought that might have been part of why I never got to the burn unit.
Oh. Interesting. But you were very healthy going in. You had been working out, you were in very good shape, and that had to have helped you.
Oh, yeah.
For sure.
My youth and my physical state was what got me through.
Yeah. So Did religion have any role in how you coped with any of the things you've had to deal with in your life, or are you not very religious?
I am not very religious. I even kind of joke. I'll say, my dad died right before I turned 25, within days.
Mm-hmm.
My mom died right before I turned 50, which is kind of strange.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always said I'll probably die right before I turn 75. And whenever I say that, people say, no. And they knock on wood, and I'm like,
yeah, that doesn't do anything.
But as far as religion, I mean, it's the source of most every war we ever have. And what kind of bothers me is when, like, somebody will say, well, thank God you survived.
Right. Yeah.
Not really God. I'm the one that survived.
Right.
And I don't blame God for getting hurt. My own fault. So I just don't understand why people thank God for every good thing that happens.
Yeah.
And never blame God for bad shit.
Right. Well, I agree with you that religion, and from a pretty young age, I grew up in actually a pretty religious family. And from a young age, I distanced myself from it because for me, it started with like, we went to a conservative temple and it was all men. And I'm like, well, I'm a woman and I'm a girl. And why do I not see myself up there? And you dug deep for your life, and it doesn't have to be religion. It was something in you that made you do it. And it's either like a love of life or like the life you wanted, like things you wanted to accomplish, or maybe just your fighting spirit.
For sure. And I don't remember if I probably talked about it, but when I was 8 or 6 or something, I was baptized Mormon.
Oh, I don't think you did say that in the book. Okay.
Lived in Reno.
Yeah.
I was baptized Mormon, and my dad, shortly after that, said, he thought it was kind of strange coming from him, but he thought it was kind of sexist, and where a man can have so many wives, but a woman can't, So he kind of fell away from it.
Mm-hmm.
After he died, my mom kind of still clung to the LDS church because it helped her. She was alone now.
Yeah, strong community.
Trying to get my career going. My sisters were both away with families, so my mom lived by herself.
Yeah.
So she would have, missionaries come by and talk and stuff, and it helped her. But so I later in life, when I met Susan and realized that she was from a very, not devout, but I'd say conservative Jewish family, and we decided we wanted to get married, I thought, out of respect, I would convert. And I did. So
that's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. All the classes and everything. But because I was going from no religion to something. And out of all the religions that I had been connected to in any way, Judaism seemed the most reasonable to me. I'm still not real God-fearing or anything, but, we still remain with, Judaism in our family.
Yeah. And for your children, was it part of their lives?
Yes. It still is, yeah.
And it still is. And yeah. So it's more cultural and almost like a family connectivity for you, it seems like, than anything else.
Religion.
Yeah. So you loved the horror genre from a young age, but you didn't really dream about that being part of that as a kid. You probably didn't even think about that. You say at one point in the book, killing people on film gets those demons out of my soul. Without the cathartic release, I would probably be in real trouble. And then I just want to hear about so it's one thing to become a stuntman, and you kind of took us to the beginning of that, but you can talk a little bit more about how you really made your way into that profession, which is quite difficult to do. And then I think you just I don't remember why you got to try out for the Jason part. And that started this entire huge career in horror that you really weren't counting on, I don't think.
Not at all.
Yeah.
Never. I mean, there's so many benefits to doing stunts because when you work with an actor or an actress that you've admired, and now you're working hand in hand with them, and they want to really work with you, not just doing an acting scene because it's a physical thing.
Yeah.
Where they want to look good.
Yeah.
It's a different vibe on the set when you're doing stunts because you're helping them look good.
Right.
You're not
right.
Doing just dialogue with them. And I never anticipated anything beyond that. That's all I ever wanted. You do all the hiring of every other stunt person on a movie.
Mm-hmm.
That's your job.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to pick and choose what stunts you want to do.
Okay.
So it's an ideal situation. I always loved coordinating. So I never tried out for Jason. I did a movie called Prison with Rennie Harlan. It was, I think, his first movie. Almost all the stunts I did myself.
Okay.
I did a high fall. It was in a prison, an old prison. I did a high fall off the 4th tier, crashed a car through an exploding main gate of the prison, all kinds of fun stuff. And the makeup effects person asked me if I've ever done any kind of makeup effects. And I really hadn't. Some couple little things, but he said, I have to have somebody play a character that has been dead for years and comes out of the ground. So it's a rotted corpse looking guy. And it's going to be a full body suit. It's going to take 3.5 hours to get into it. Lenses in my eyes, dentures, prosthetic glued everywhere. And he said, do you want to do it? And I said, sure, I'll do that. Yeah. That sounds fun. And I think I was only in the makeup for 1 or 2 days, just doing the scene. And one of the things that this guy named John Beekler is the one that did the makeup effects. And he was amazed that the director and him were like, hey, just because you're a rotted corpse coming out of the ground, we want to put worms on you. I said, okay, live worms.
Yeah, yeah.
So it looked really creepy. And I said, oh, how cool would it be if I had them, when I stand up and I scream, they come out of my mouth.
They're like, you'll do that?
That's exactly. They both say, what? You would do that? I said, yeah, that's no big deal. Just rinse them off. It's only worms. And so I did it. But that, along with how I used the makeup and worked with it to make the character more enjoyable to watch, I guess. John Beekler, the makeup effects guy, was hired to direct Friday the 13th, Part 7 the following year. And immediately when he got the job, he started saying, this is the guy that's Jason. Because they had had 6 movies before.
Yeah.
And it was a different person every time. So they weren't against using somebody new again, but they were a little leery.
That they didn't know anything about you.
Yeah.
Isn't it crazy how this one thing, this guy asking, hey, would you do this scene, completely changed your life?
Yep. And once I was finally officially hired to do the movie, I couldn't believe it. And I also stunt coordinated that. So I got to do and plan all the stunts. And that's, after that movie came out, everything changed.
So you go to conventions all the time. You've been in Do you know how many horror movies of the 180? How many are horror?
I think I just had somebody research it. I think I've done 77 horror movies.
A lot. So can you just talk a little bit about like the fans and the genre and like the love? Because it feels like a very strong love of this genre.
On Susan's birthday.
Oh.
Which was a Friday.
Okay.
The 13th. Friday, the 13th of May, 1988, is when the movie was released in theaters, and we had a big opening thing at the Chinese Theater in Hollywood when it was one big theater, jam-packed, and just sitting there watching the fans react to my stuff on screen was amazing. And then I was invited to come to a horror convention, and I said, yeah, I'll check it out. I knew nothing about it. During a panel that John Beekler was having about the movie before it came out, he said, by the way, the new Jason is sitting right there.
I think you did put that in the book. And people were running after you to get your autograph before they'd even seen the movie. And you now sign, how many autographs are you signing a year? Do you have any idea?
I really don't. I do about 20 conventions a year.
Okay.
And
all over the world or all over the country?
All over the world.
Okay.
I've been to Germany, Ireland, Canada, of course, Mexico.
Horror fans are everywhere.
Yeah. I just love the horror fans, and especially when somebody will come up to my table at a convention and show me an old picture that they took. And I'll look at it, and it's from like early 90s or something.
Yeah.
I'll look at it, and I'll say, no, I'm holding an infant in the picture.
And it's them?
And it's them with their kids now. It's me fucking old, but at the same time, that's amazing.
It's amazing. It's multi-generational, and there are certain industries or certain franchises, I think, where that happens, and then others where it doesn't happen at all.
Right.
So why do you think that happens in horror?
Maybe because there's so many sequels that fans are able to stick with
the character
for so long. Because, most people think the Mount Rushmore of horror characters is Jason, Freddy Krueger, Michael Myers from Halloween, if you know that one, and Leatherface from Texas Massacre. You know that I've been playing Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre game.
Yeah, tell me about that. You were telling me about that the other day, which is so cool. And you go in a suit. Is it called a green? Is it called a green suit? Like a suit where they
just a mocap suit is what they call it.
Okay, and then you move and they can get it on the game. And there are multiple versions, right?
What?
Multiple versions of the game now? You've done it several times.
No, not the same game, but they keep adding more characters and more interesting stuff, which we did the Friday the 13th game.
Yeah.
Too, but we never did all of that after the fact. The game came out almost a year ago, and we just did another session 2 weeks ago. I don't remember if I told you what happened at the studio this last session.
I don't know. What happened?
That we do the motion capture at Henson Studios in Hollywood.
Okay.
And it's an historic studio, and we're on the Charlie Chaplin stage. And there's a recording studio right next door to the stage that we're on. And a lot of singers, musicians, and stuff record in there. And I was excited because a couple people came into our stage, took pictures. They're holding chainsaws and stuff because they're kind of fans.
Yeah.
It's Machine Gun Kelly and Jelly Roll.
Oh.
Which is, I love
Jelly
Roll's music.
So good. I love it too.
And it was that's another benefit of this stuff is that at some points, people that you look up to may feel like you're on the same level.
So they gave the Jason role to somebody else. That was many, many years ago. And I don't know, you kind of allude in the book, like you still don't really know what happened. Do you feel like you have closure on that, or that you'll never have closure on that? But Like, and you seem like you've got a lot of great things going on. So
I do, but I just wish I had been given a reason.
Yeah.
Whether I agreed with it or not, just tell me why.
Yeah. And tell you instead of not telling you.
Right.
That's the thing where I'm like, why do people have so much trouble just being honest? Like, you're not going to get the role.
If they had just told me from the beginning that we're going to go in a different direction, I would have been happy that I did 4 in a row.
Yeah.
But to tell me I'm doing it,
yeah,
and then go in a different direction, it just seemed more insulting.
Yeah.
And then never tell me why. So, it was hard for me to understand any logical reasoning because I was still in really good shape and couldn't have said I was too old or anything like that.
Yeah. But you're doing a lot of great things. And hopefully you've done some work to like process it. You've had to process a lot of things like the burn and the bullying, right? So you kind of had some practice processing difficult things. It does sound like your career is pretty awesome right now.
No, it is. I mean, the ironic thing is that because of conventions and autograph shows and stuff, I'm making 5 times the money I used to make risking my life.
Yeah.
Which was good also.
Right.
But the autograph money is insane.
Yeah.
And it's, it's just enjoyable. It's more tiring than people think.
Well, and the travel.
You're sitting there signing stuff. How hard is that? Well, when you have to answer the same question 50 times.
Yeah.
And they haven't heard the answer. So you can't answer like, oh, here we go again.
Right.
You have to answer with enthusiasm. That takes work.
Oh, that definitely takes work. And you're traveling, which is exhausting. Right. I think all of it sounds, tiring, but also I think it gives you energy because, and you have a lot of these in the book, again, these stories of fans, like really quality interactions with fans. Right. So that's very cool.
Oh, that's better than the money almost.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so you have 2 boys. I know that they came on set at least once, and one of them, or maybe both of them, had a cameo in at least one movie?
Well, yes.
Both of them?
Reed was in a movie called Ed Gein.
Okay.
Which is another real guy that existed, like BTK.
Okay.
And I played him, and Reed was like 6 or something. And he had a line.
Oh, he had a line?
Yeah. So that was kind of fun. Jace is the first Hatchet movie.
Okay. The one we're going to watch?
Yes. Okay.
They love horror?
They don't hate it, but I don't think it's their favorite.
It's not like a passion.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, because, neither of them chose to follow my footsteps, which was totally fine. I never expected that.
Yeah.
I didn't follow my father.
Right.
I did.
Yeah.
Both are. That's fine. Totally fine.
So we were talking earlier about like the impact your father and mother have had on you. And you and Susan have you guys have such a wonderful family. Do you have any advice for dads and maybe even dads who travel? Like you did have to like go off on set a lot, but you were always very involved in their lives. Like, do you have any advice?
I would just say, just be aware of it. Doesn't mean you have to dictate your career.
Right.
Because if you have, a career that demands a lot of attention, then unfortunately you're going to have to do that.
Right.
But don't forget about your wife and kids or spouse and kids.
Yeah.
And, especially since, as you know from reading the book, I don't have any contact with anyone I'm related to.
Yeah.
I believe one of my sisters is gone. I don't know about the other one. And then the other one, the other half sister that I never met. And I don't speak to any cousins or aunts or uncles or nephews, niece, nothing, which, is unfortunate, but I think it's as a result of my repercussions from the OCD and the PTSD.
From the burn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, I know it was difficult for all my family to deal with that, but my mom always stuck it out. She always did whatever I asked her to do, which would often seem unreasonable, just so I could be comfortable having her in the house.
Yeah. Well, I can say as a mom, mothers love their kids. I mean, it's hard to think of things you wouldn't do for your kids. So, but still, it's amazing she did. It's wonderful that she did, Yeah.
Especially after my dad was gone, she's still helping me deal with stuff. And she wasn't really that knowledgeable about mental health issues, but she was always willing to try.
Yeah. Well, people didn't talk about things the same way then. And there wasn't the internet, like things weren't as readily available to read about either. So, you kind of had to be an expert at that time, I think.
Right. And the fact that, had a heart attack 2.5 years ago, that was a little wake-up call saying, oh, you're not like the person you used to be. I thought I was healthy and had a great diet and still had a heart attack. So
yeah,
it's just so much you can do to avoid the genetic factor.
Right.
My dad had 3 of them.
Right.
But he also never quit smoking and all that stuff. And then having a seizure last year on the plane. And that's another time where they say, it was on the plane. I said, yeah, but we hadn't left the gate yet. Oh, thank God.
I mean, like you said, there's certain things you can't control. I mean, we do our best. Yeah. But I think, obviously you're very focused, and Susan's also very focused on your health, but also just having this mindset, like, we don't know how much time we have. We should really enjoy and live life to the fullest for the time that we do have. I'm actually in September starting a series on the podcast on death and dying. It will be 10 years since I lost my dad to a rare cancer. And I just feel like we don't talk about death enough. And it's, it's funny because you have this like line in the book about how people who aren't horror fans are just scared of death. And I don't know that I agree with that. Although I was telling you about this paper that this palliative care doctor told me about, where basically like every fear we all have is about death. So maybe there's some truth in that. But I do think it's right that we don't talk about it enough. And it's not that it'll make it easier, but we can like prepare for it.
You don't have to avoid talking.
Right. We shouldn't avoid it. And we should prepare for it for our loved ones, frankly, and for our own peace, But also just this idea of like, let's live the life we have to live.
Right. And if you remember, I believe it's in the book that when I was trying to get everything going and my mom and dad were still in Sparks, and I got a chance to audition for a Coors Light commercial in LA.
Mm-hmm.
So I leave my mom and dad's house, and my dad's on his recliner. I say, I got to go, Dad, see ya. And I go. And he fucking dies that night.
Stop, it was that night.
That night. I'm gone one night, and he dies. And the last thing I said to him, I'll see it. So, point being that every single time I say goodbye to my sons or my wife, I end it with, I love you.
Mm. You make me cry, Kane. I am a crier, though.
If something terrible happens, I want that to be the last thing.
Yeah.
Well, this really brought it down, didn't it? Jesus. Fuck, I just wanted, the last thing I said to my loved one is, I love you. So every single time I leave or hang up, that's what I say.
And I'm sure that they hear it and they know it. And that's amazing. I know you even say in the beginning, like, you weren't going to write a book for a long time because it was just like people just wanted the money, to be honest, like publishers. And then you found Michael and you had a really good connection and he was a horror fan and you knew he was really going to tell your story. And I think you were probably just like ready to tell your story. I mean, I think probably, it's not an easy story. And I think that's why it's so touching. Like, it's really a meaningful book. Like, I mean, I haven't seen a horror movie. I'm not a horror fan, but I'm a fan of yours. And I think a lot of people feel that way. And it's because you were willing to be vulnerable, and you are willing to be vulnerable, and not everybody is.
If you can't show emotions, you're not very strong.
I agree with that.
It doesn't typically make sense, but that's how it feels.
I totally agree with that. I think it's harder to do it and to open yourself up to the pain of like what could come on the other end of it. But life is so much richer that way too. Thanks for listening to an episode of On the Table with Ashley. Subscribing to, rating, and reviewing our podcast helps us to continue to record great interviews. So please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you get your podcasts. If you're interested in learning more about the products we talked about on the show, visit amattendre.com. That's AMEATENDRE.com to check them out. When you become a member by sharing your email on our website, we'll share special discounts that relate to products discussed on each episode. Finally, email us at reachoutanytime@amattendre.com with thoughts you have or ideas for topics or guests for future episodes. Thanks for listening.